Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the Managing Director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're discussing the so-called plenary power doctrine. I thought of making this video actually after watching another video on YouTube, and I'm going to go ahead and put the link to that video in the description below. But long story short, we're talking about the plenary power doctrine. And the plenary power doctrine is a rather interesting thing. I urge folks who really want to get deep into that per se, go check out that link to learn the plenary power doctrine, how it interacts with U.S. immigration law. Long story short, the plenary power doctrine stipulates that Congress makes laws regarding immigration, and the courts are constrained in their interpretation of those laws because of the powers inherent to the Congress regarding foreign nationals, that is clearly a power of the federal government. It's clearly a power of the Congress to make immigration laws. And those immigration laws are largely left undisturbed in terms of the interpretation of them. You know, the court cannot be an activist court regarding U.S. immigration law because that's Congress's function. Congress is supposed to make the laws on it, then the president is supposed to enforce the laws, but the courts are kind of there to take sort of a back seat, because when you're talking about foreign nationals, especially foreign nationals who might not necessarily be in the United States, you're talking about a different thing. You're not talking about Americans where, you know, the laws apply by dint of citizenry. We're talking about non-U.S. nationals and how law applies to them, and the laws Congress makes pertaining to them should have limited judicial oversight because that is Congress's primary function, and it's not really appropriate for the courts to step in all situations regarding matters pertaining to immigration law. So leaving that sort of aside, again, I urge those to watch the link in the video description, but there's a small part of that, and it's sort of, there's kind of a jump cut in the middle in the video, but it is said in that video that, and I quote, that this plenary power doctrine is, quote unquote, judicially created, which caused me, you know, this is kind of one of those things that people hate in sort of the deeper, more esoteric aspects of the law, because you get into kind of these circular arguments where it's, okay, well, so the plenary power doctrine is judicially created. I would say that's not really actually, in my mind, to my mind, that's not really the case. To my mind, the plenary power doctrine is basically a stipulation of fact, which is Congress makes these rules. And again, it's not really the court's place in this specific instance to sort of interfere in Congress's rule-making capability, law-making capability as it pertains to foreign nationals. So to my mind, it's not judicially created, it's just judicially noticed, if you will. But leaving that aside, it does kind of beg the question then, if the court says, and bear in mind, this is the court saying it's judicially created, I think there's a difference between, again, them creating it and taking notice of a legal fact, but okay, leave that aside. If it's judicially created, then presumably it could be judicially destroyed. And that's what concerns me about the notion of the plenary power doctrine being judicially created, is you could have an activist court come along sometime and say, no, we don't agree with that. We're going to destroy the plenary power doctrine. And I think, in my opinion, that would have serious negative ramifications in certain ways from a constitutional level in just it's sort of in the sphere of immigration law. So again, this is probably not going to be one of my most popular videos because it's getting into some deep, sort of more esoteric, if you will, detailed aspects of the law and sort of the underlying policies that undergird the law. But it is worth pointing out, and I think it's rather interesting to look at, as to whether or not the plenary power doctrine is just something that or plenary power is just something that exists, which I believe it is, and I actually think that there is plenty of not just case law, but history and governmental philosophy, if you will, out there to bolster that argument. But also, again, this is kind of one of those things that the courts do, especially at the higher levels from time to time, where they just sort of infer in their own powers, where they just sort of kind of quickly say, well, that's, you know, the plenary power doctrine is judicially created, which again sort of implies it could be destroyed. So, you know, how all this is going to play out remains to be seen, but As you're probably aware at this point, I'll be keeping you updated as and when I see it necessary to take note of these kind of little things having to do with U.S. immigration law.